Welcome. My name is Jillian Formentin, and you have joined us for the Clough Expert Series podcast. And today we have a very special guest, David Vasquez, and he is the Engineering Director of Clough in North America. So, David, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our podcast. And today, David and I are going to be talking about consequential decision making. But let's start with you. Maybe just start by telling us a bit about yourself, maybe a bit about some of the key turning points in your career, and what had you accept the offer to join Clough?
Thanks for having me, first of all. And chemical engineer out of Michigan Tech, graduated in 1988, started at Total Petroleum. So I spent 24 years of my career on the operating side of the spectrum. So mainly refining. I did a 2-year stint as a terminal manager for Vopak, then decided to move to the EPC side of things and get back to the engineering roots. I worked about 3 years at Total. That was where I came out of college and did process engineering, and that was in Elma, Michigan, a small 50,000 barrel a day refinery, but cut your teeth on a lot of stuff. You learn a lot of the things, got to do a lot of small projects and troubleshooting, and you learn all that kind of stuff, and you learn the trade, so to speak. From there, I went to Citgo in Corpus Christi, Texas, and that is where I spent 13 and a half years with Citgo, and basically call what I would say punched my tickets on all the different things. I held a lot of different roles in Citgo. Started off as a process engineer, then moved out to the operations engineering piece of it, then moved into economics and planning, and we'll talk about that because I think that was a turning point in my career, which was very interesting. Of course, at the time, you probably have my fingernail marks on the pavement. I was on the cat cracker. Most people maybe on this side of the fence don't know, but in refining, if you're on the cat, that's the coup de grace. Everybody wants to be the cat cracker engineer because it's like the center of the universe for refining. It used to be. Now it's kind of shifted to hydrocrackers, but cat cracking, I was like, I guess, a big fish in a small pond out there. And when I got to economics and planning, they pulled a couple of us out of the operations engineering ranks and moved us into economics and planning to get us more well-rounded. That was moving it to a small fish in a very big pond. I mean, I couldn't even speak the language. I spent a few years in economics and planning, and then they pulled a bunch of people out to be what they called shift managers for different shifts. So you ran that shift and basically had control of the whole plant for that shift. So I got to work shift work. That was great. Interesting. I thought I would hate it, but I spent a couple of years in that position, and you learn a lot there. That was actually the first supervisory position that I had in my career. After a good amount of time there, decided to shift gears, and Citgo at the time was going through some changes. My friends had already left and went to Valero, and they gave me a call, and I ended up going to Valero, worked at Texas City as a complex manager, and then got promoted to the director of operations for the Houston refinery. I ran that for 5 years. That plant actually has a very warm spot in my heart. As you can imagine, working in those kind of jobs, it was with small kids. I lived at the refineries, so I decided to shift gears a little bit. That's when I got into the EPC side. I spent some time with some small firms, Elcon and RDS, and then Middo, which was the stepping stone into Clough, which we were helping Salisbury at the time with some of the process engineering and mechanical engineering effort on the FEL3 for Project Traveler. The project director at the time, I knew him through working with Adam Stashik, made me an offer to come over there as process engineering manager. So I said, yeah, I'll take it. And I brought my team with me that was working there. So they're all working for Clough now as well. And we ended up going into the Clough organization, starting and working in the process group. And then shortly after that, the project director had left, and he was filling both roles as operations VP and engineering VP. So he had both under his belt at Salisbury. Adam offered me the director job. So I've been in this position since January of 2020.
That's quite an adventure.
That was Yeah, that's quite a long-winded story, but tried to keep it short.
No, good. You've had a very, very rich career so far. Maybe if you could tell us a bit about one or two decisions that you've made for your career that created turning points.
One of the first ones for me was actually accepting to go to the economics and planning group, like I mentioned earlier. That, of course, I look back on all those experiences and that, now they're like, man, I thank God I had the opportunity to do that, right? Because I learned a ton of stuff. The economics and planning piece is invaluable to what you understand, because I know refining processes, I know the technologies, I know the technical aspects of all that stuff and how they run and all that kind of stuff. When I got into economics and planning, like I said, I was a big fish in a small pond, then went to be a very small fish in a very big pond. Learning that gave me a perspective on refining that. It was kind of like that piece of the puzzle that you lost or dropped on the floor or something. You can't find it. Where is it? Where is it? That was the piece that it connected everything together. And you got to see a whole bigger picture of how the whole ball works, and from supply all the way to product. And that was a big turning point. And I'm glad I took that opportunity to do that, because that changed my perspective on things. And that kind of information even to this day serves me well, because, people will ask questions, even in EPC, why would a client want to do this, or why are they building this? And, you can go and you can pull up pricing and stuff like that and say, well, they're buying, this feedstock is low and they expect it to be low for the next X number of years. So they'll make this margin on this. So this is, and they can buy it, all that kind of stuff. Understanding that and knowing that I feel is a big advantage, actually, to understanding the perspective from, say, clients or operators alike.
Oh, very good. And I love how you said it like it was a puzzle piece that all together for you. And at the time of making the decision to do that, you wouldn't have been able to see that vast world that opened up. But
no, like I said, you could see my fingernail marks in the.
Excellent. Well, that's really great. I mean, it's a great decision about your career. So let's talk a little bit about some of the important decisions that you've made as an engineer, like work, maybe for clients. What are some decisions that you've made? This will kind of get us into some of this conversation about decision making.
I can give you an example when we were doing a project on a cat cracker. So there's a powertrain, and this powertrain had a 2-stage expander on it, as an example. It was 2 stages, so it had 2 wheels on it, right? And the problem that we ran into was it limited time between turnarounds to 3 years. Okay. And it had other issues too, like it had a synchronous motor on it. So in order to get the RPMs up to where you could synchronize it, required the entire refinery to drop pressure on all their 600-pound users, which was dangerously low, just to get that one machine up to speed so we could put the motor on, and then it would take over and the blower would run on the motor, and then you could have all the power generation and everything working properly. I said, look, man, you guys need to go to a single stage, because what would happen was, as a motor generator is designed to make gasoline, not power. What would limit it was, because it was a 2-stage expander, between the stages on the rotor, you would have catalyst eddy currents that would, on the flue gas, that would spin inside there. And it has small, cat cracking catalyst is like talcum powder, but accelerated like that, it would cut the roots of the expander blades. We had strobes that would look, and you could see how deep these were, and that would determine when you had to shut the plant down. And the neighboring plant had actually threw a blade on one of their expanders through the casing, and they had big fire and everything like that. It was not good. I got up and I said, look, you guys make gasoline with this, not power. Go to a single stage. You'll get rid of all these issues. They ended up doing that. So we went to a single stage. I think that cat today is going 7 years between turnarounds, which is amazing.
Very good, isn't it?
So those kind of decisions, and you got to convince these owners, that that's the right thing to do, because they're getting told, hey, you can sell electricity to the grid. Who cares? You know, I mean, you want to make gasoline. That's what you're here for. And the way you present that is you have to be very kid gloves, right? Kid gloves. For us, getting clients to understand what is really entailed in doing a detailed engineering design to construction work is not just going out and buying the equipment and, you know, pouring some cement there and bolting it down and hooking it up with flanges and let's go. There's so much more to it.
Yeah, because part of our role is often to help our clients to make the right decisions. So we provide the technical input, we sometimes economic input, the stark reality of what they're trying to do, and for them to make the decision. So what do you think our clients need from us or rely on us for so that they can make those decisions?
First thing overall, I think they want honesty, right? They want us to be honest with them. And secondly, integrity. So those are two biggies this is me talking, because we should be upfront with our clients and we should do what we say we're going to do. That is a complaint I've heard from operators. That is a complaint that I had when I was on that side, because typically they do lack the understanding per se on really what is involved. You know, even say just speccing out a pressure gauge and putting it in a location and all the stuff that goes to that all takes time and effort. And I think they lose sight of it because, you know, they can just go out into a Connex in the refinery and pull an Ashcroft pressure gauge and just screw it into a pipe and say, how hard is that? You know, but to design it, and what they don't understand is that we have to take the liability. So as an EPC contractor, we're taking risk. And I think that they need to understand that risk is on us, and especially lump sum work. We take all the risk or the majority of it. But I think honesty and integrity are two of the top things that they want from us.
Yeah, because you're building a relationship of trust, aren't you?
Yes.
And then sometimes we might, to move that project forward in the way that we can see they might need to make decisions quite quickly. And if we haven't built that trust with them, then it makes it impossible to do that. Yeah, I can see what you're saying, like the integrity, the honesty, and being upfront about things can really build a foundation so that you're able to work together with our clients really well.
They tend to get a little upset when you keep putting change orders on change orders and change orders. But you try to soften that stuff early on when you're going in to the initial phases of a project, but sometimes it gets lost down the road and it ends up being contentious because it's money.
One of the things that there is to be honest about sometimes is maybe there's a set of consequences that we can see from the view that we have as the EPC contractor, and we need to be able to explain it in a way that allows them to make the right decisions. So let's talk about, well, what do we mean by consequences? What are some of the kind of consequences that you've dealt with, and maybe some that you've avoided, or I don't know if you've got any stories about consequences that didn't get avoided?
I have one particular one, and it's all safety related, right? We have to absolutely ensure safety at every cost. We have to give the plan of safe operation as our goal. So one thing, we had a client, and this was at a previous EPC. We had a client that insisted on using relief devices on a pipeline that was absolutely the wrong way to use these devices. And it basically, the way they wanted to use this device was not proper, and it wasn't proper on any code or any of even the guidelines or API guidelines or anything. It's just not proper thing to do. And they said, we always do this. This is what we're supposed to do. And I tried to convince him multiple times, this is not right. We showed him all the literature and all the stuff, codes and all that kind of stuff. And they still want to do it. And I said, well, okay. So as a decision, I told him, look, if you want to do that, then you'll have to go to someone else besides us, because we're not going to take the liability for that. And we're not going to do this. We are not going to design something like this and put our name on it because it's incorrect and it's unsafe. I made that decision without my boss, without my boss's approval, because it was flat out wrong and unsafe. They later decided to do the right thing, but the consequence could have been dumped us as a contractor, right? But as it turns out, honesty and integrity are critical. They are all tied to safety. And that's got to be the best policy. So that's a hard conversation to have with a client when you tell them, look, you're wrong. And that how do you tell them that? Now, I didn't say it that way, obviously. Almost have to hold their hand through some of this stuff and show them, because we are the experts. And we're supposed to be the experts in this stuff because we do it all the time. And these guys
that's what they're paying us for. Yeah.
That's what they're paying us for.
That's really good. Well, let's get into a bit about, because you touched on it a bit in what you were sharing then, but why can decision making be hard? Like what are some of the things that make decision making difficult?
The obvious one is relationships, right? You don't want to make the client mad. So some of the decisions we have to make in the role as a contractor, because we're hired to do a job, and you're trying to tell the person that's paying you, if it's an unpopular decision, those kind of things make it, because you don't want to have to face that negativity from the client if they don't like the decision you're making. Other things are you sure? That's the other thing. If you're unsure about a decision or you don't know the answer, and you should, everybody thinks you should. So it's like nobody wants to speak up and ask a question that people or your peers, your colleagues may think is stupid, right? Although they may have all the same questions as well, and they want to know the answer to it as well. But nobody asks that question because you don't want to be viewed as, that guy didn't know this, I think that plays a big part.
So avoiding criticism. I mean, we even call it sticking your neck out, don't we? It's quite a vulnerable thing to do, is to stick your neck out and be the one making that decision.
And the other thing is time to make this. Sometimes we have to make quick decisions, right? With little data. And let's take, you get a tender. And this is very common now, at least on our side of the fence, that today, in the old days, you would do a feed, right? And in the old days, you do a feed for time and materials reimbursable. But now they're asking for, and we had this happen. They want a bid on some of these tenders that come through. The client wants, in the tender, they want to bid and go right to a lump sum TIC estimate without a feed, without any information. That is the wrong thing to do, right? But if you don't bid it, you're not going to win it. You're faced with that. So that's an example of where you have to make decisions on whether to bid it or not, number one, or do you want to give them a number, or how much of a number do you have to give them with very little time and very little data. We get faced with that a lot. And have to make kinds of decisions like that. And I know that's probably not kind of what you're looking for, but it's time and data, lack of data, that can really shape your response and decision making.
Yeah, I was just going to add there too, David, and sometimes it might be kind of backing yourself a bit too, and making sure that you can get sufficient data so that you can make the decision. If you're out to build trust with your client, or your potential client, maybe in this case, sometimes it's helping them understand that there needs to be some more data for us to be able to really help them with what they want.
Actually have gotten the clients to say, yeah, you're right. Let's just do, a plus or minus 30% estimate for us. We understand you don't have all the quantities and all that kind of stuff that you need to do a good solid estimate. So we understand that, blah, blah. So if you talk them through that, that's good, but you have to bring it up. You can't just give them a number, because that's not a good decision. In making decisions, and I rely on my team, my department managers a lot, because they have specific experience in certain areas. So as a team, and I truly believe that team collaboration needs a better answer to a problem or a question or anything like that. Getting the team to collaborate and discuss everything together and come up with a collaborative answer, I think, is the best way to answer that kind of stuff, and rely on the folks that are experts. No one knows the answer to everything. No one does.
Very good. I was just gonna say too, like, one of my favourite things about working with Clough is that we have got some exceptional experts, and we need to be able to tap into that expertise, understand how people work together, and allow the right people to be guiding us in making the right decisions. Because one of the things I've seen in my career too is sometimes if decisions are made badly, the kind of decisions we regret, sometimes that can be from overconfidence. So confidence is something that we talk about as being a good thing. Like, it is good to have confidence in our decisions, but sometimes if it's overconfidence, it might be making decision from a bias or some preconceived idea that may be falsely shaping our perspective. Like you say, like not allowing the right sets of eyes to help us collaborate and understand the whole picture before the decision's made. Because one of the things I've seen in my career too, some terrible consequences. I mean, safety is often, when we talk about consequences, safety is often one we look at because some of those are really obvious. But there are other consequences. It may be economic consequences, or a decision that we made now that feels safer can set us up for pain in the future that we might have been able to avoid if we got a better picture.
So one of those, when you talk in those terms, in a project, if we're so driven to a schedule that we skimp on quality to get deliverables out the door to meet a schedule, and we haven't checked those, that's a risk. And that, to me, that is one thing that I think we should take the time and do it right and make sure that stuff is right and make sure it's checked properly. Because down the road, once it gets to the field and it gets into construction, the mistake is way more costly than fixing it then and losing whatever time on a schedule because your deliverable was a day late versus, getting it to the field and it being wrong and then having to fix it or something like that.
Maybe one final question, and it might be kind of a two-sided question, but I want to know a bit about, when you think of the world of decision-making, what's a decision that you've made that you're most proud of in your career so far?
Taking the opportunities that I had in front of me. So we go back to the operating side of things. Now, at the time, I probably didn't think this way, but taking the opportunity to learn as much as I did on the refining side and the terminal side for that matter, and taking the opportunities like the economics and planning, you're doing the operation shift assignments and those kind of things, and then you're drawing it all together. So that experience, and then making the decision to go to EPC side of things, which I will say on the engineering and construction side of the business versus the operations side of things, it does offer me, from a personal standpoint, it gave me the opportunity to spend more time with my family, which is extremely important, and see my kids grow up and be part of their lives versus spending it in the refinery. And to the career side of things, I think that making those choices and actually going through that stuff, because a lot of those decisions came with a lot of hard work, especially on the operations side of things, and then learning all that stuff and then coming to the EPC side as now I'm really a small fish in a very big pond, and I had to learn that over the last 10 years and get that experience. I think now those decisions that I made have given me the ability to bridge the gap, because I was a client. I mean, I was the guy that sat in the office and said, I don't want to see that guy in this refinery again. I'm tired of, listening to this and that. I don't have time for this, blah, blah, blah. Now I see that, I feel kind of remorseful for doing that in some respects. But now understanding this side of it, bridging that gap. So how do you use that skill to convince clients that this is how EPC is done, and this is why, the whys behind why we do things, why it takes so much time, why it costs this, why it does that. I feel that I can be a bridge for that. And I think making those decisions to actually do that work early in my career, I think, was a good decision, not only from a personal standpoint, but also from a career standpoint.
So, David, another question that I had for you was, and this is a question I'm always engaging in for myself too, right? But what do you want for Clough engineers in the future?
Yeah, so I would say that looking at, Clough North America and being, North America being new to Clough over here, we have to build a reputation for Clough, a good reputation. My goals really kind of go along the lines of trying to build a world-class engineering team for North America to be able to build a strong reputation and get the Clough name out there. And that'll allow us to grow the business, which is critical on this side of the world to get up to speed for where you guys are in APAC and help start paying our way, so to speak, right? And then attract, once we get to that point, we'll start attracting key talent in the area, which builds our SME pools, attracts those kind of folks that even bolster us even more to get more and more good work with key clients and bigger companies, so like Exxon and Shell and these guys that have, they have their built-in companies, but I want Clough to be that built-in company. I want them to come to Clough and say, look, just give it to Clough. They'll take care of it. Don't even bid it. Just give it to them. That's the ultimate goal we need to have in. And ultimately, and this is big for me, I really want our employees here to genuinely look forward to being a part of Clough North America and be proud to show it. Talk to their neighbors, talk to their families, talk to, at the barbecue, they say, hey, I work for Clough. I don't know. Do you know that Clough does this and Clough does that? Because that's infectious. That's the goal.
Because we've had that kind of history here. And I mean, a company like Clough builds and grows, and we're in a period of growth right now. So it's a very exciting journey to have globally. And I think there's probably some links that we can make too to connect your engineers with engineers here in Australia better too, so that we can learn and grow together.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
That's great. David, thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk through some of this, and it's particularly interesting for me because we hold the same role but in very different parts of the world for the same company, which is it's kind of a unique opportunity to talk together like this. So thank you very much.
Yes.
Very good. All right.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Thank you to everyone for joining us and listening to our conversation about consequential decision making today. So you've been here with David Vasquez, who is the Engineering Director of Clough in North America. And I look forward to bringing the next podcast to you next month. Thank you.